Hello, and welcome to another episode of Muscle for Life. I am your host, Mike Matthews. Thank you for joining me today for a Q&A where I'm answering, maybe 10 or 15 questions that people have asked me over on Instagram at Muscle for Life Fitness every week or two. On Monday or Tuesday, I put up an Ask Me a Question story and then gather up a bunch of questions, answer them on Instagram, and then come over here and answer them again on the podcast. And I'm always looking for questions that I have not answered many times before, that I haven't written about or spoken about repeatedly, or questions that I'm just getting asked a lot about and that I haven't also beaten to death already. And sometimes I take some questions that just amuse me and give me a chance to at least laugh at my own jokes. And so if you want me to answer your questions, just follow me over on Instagram at Muscle for Life Fitness and look for the Ask Me a Question story that goes up every week or two and ask me some questions, and maybe I'll pick one of yours. And so in today's episode, I am answering questions regarding how to train when one limb is injured. Should you train the other limb, the uninjured limb, or train nothing? I talk about how I am progressing in my training on my accessory exercises, like specifically what type of progression model, what method of progression am I using. I answer a question regarding deadlifting, particularly the grip. Should you use a mixed grip? Should you use a double overhand grip? Should you use a hook grip? Should you use straps? I talk about how I get motivated to do my cardio. I answer a question about teledildonics and more. Before we sink our teeth into it, if you like what I'm doing here on the podcast and elsewhere, and if you want to help me do more of it, please do check out my sports nutrition company, Legion, because while you don't need supplements to build muscle, lose fat, and get healthy, the right ones can help. And that's why over 350,000 discerning fitness folk have chosen Legion for their supplementation needs. Well, that and the fact that we have 100% natural products, we have clinically effective ingredients and doses, and a no-hassle money-back guarantee. Plus, Legion is currently holding its first big sale of the year right over at buylegion.com, buylegion.com. And that means for the next few days, you can save up to 30% on everything in our store, including our protein powders, our pre-workout and post-workout supplements, our fat burners, multivitamins, joint support, and more. So skedaddle on over to buylegion.com, buylegion.com now, and save big before we run out of stock of at least a thing or two. Sometimes it's a flavor or two, other times it's a product or two, because demand is much higher than we forecasted. It's basically impossible to predict these things perfectly. And so when we have these big site-wide sales, which we only do a couple of times per year, we do tend to run out of stock of things. So if you don't want that to happen, buylegion.com, lock in your savings, and bask in the post-purchase glow. A card 97 asks, shoulder is in a sling for 2 months. Is it worth doing single arm curls or shoulder raises, etc. with the good arm? Yes, it actually is. As it happens, research shows that training an uninjured limb can help preserve muscle and strength in an injured or immobilized one. It sounds like bro science, but it's real. It is called the crossover effect, and you can look it up if you want to learn more about it. Big Bad Booty Daddy, which sounds familiar. I think I've answered one of his questions before. Anyway, he asks, it's definitely a he, right? You hit 4 sets of 10 on a secondary exercise, and then you go for 10 to 11 the next time, or do you move up in weight? Now, some context, he is referring to my training, and I'm following my Beyond Bigger, Leaner, Stronger program, which you can learn about in my book, Beyond Bigger, Leaner, Stronger. And on accessory exercises, you progress from doing sets of 10 to 12 to 6 to 8. And in a future update to the book, I may go from 10 to 12 to 4 to 6, because I do think there is some value in doing heavy 4 to 6 rep sets with certain isolation, certain accessory exercises. Like Dumbbell side raises, rear raises, not so much. That's kind of obnoxious. It gets hard to just maintain proper form as you get stronger, but a biceps curl, different triceps exercises, accessory exercises for your lower body, I do think there's some value in there. And anyway, so what I am doing currently is I'm adding weight on an accessory exercise when I get 4 sets of the top of the rep range that I'm working in at any given point in a training block. And as I mentioned, those rep ranges will range from 6 to 8. Sometimes it's 4 to 6. I've been doing that in my own training, even though in the book it's 6 to 8 to 10 to 12 on accessories. And if you want to learn more about this type of progression, this method of progression, it's called double progression. Just head over to legionathletics.com, search for double progression, and you can find an article that I wrote on it. I might have recorded a podcast. I probably have over the years, and I'm just not remembering. And yeah, Blake V.A. Barker asks, are straps needed when you get to heavy weight on conventional deadlifts? And he's probably asking me this because I use straps, and anybody who follows me on Instagram at Muscle for Life Fitness and watches my stories will see my workouts and will see that I do use straps on my heavy deadlift sets. Now, why? Because when the weight gets heavy, so for me, anything over the mid 300s is where my double overhand grip will fail. I can double overhand low 300s, at least for probably 4 to 6, but probably not 8 to 10. And so once the weight gets heavy enough, or if you are doing, let's say 8 to 10 reps with heavy enough weight, you either have to use straps or you have to use a hook grip or a mixed grip. In the past, I did a mixed grip, which is where you have one arm be palm up, the other arm palm down. For me, I'm right-handed, and it always felt more comfortable to have my right palm up and my left palm down. But there are disadvantages to the mixed grip, and there are major disadvantages to the hook grip, which is where you wrap your fingers not around the bar in the traditional normal way that you grip the bar, but you wrap your fingers around the bar and around your thumb. And it works. It improves your grip. Well, it's not really your grip strength. It improves your grip on the bar, but it is very uncomfortable. And maybe I've just been a wussy, because if you do enough hook gripping, apparently your thumb just gets used to it, basically, kind of like a front squat position. But I never got there. So instead, I started to use straps. And if you want the whole rundown, if you want to hear about the advantages and disadvantages of straps, mixed grip, hook grip, head over to legionathletics.com, search for deadlift grip, and you'll find an article I wrote on it. Moving on to Brandon881014's question. What is a good grip for the barbell bench press? Well, you want to be about shoulder width apart in your grip for normal pressing. So you want your forearms to be straight up and down. You want them to not be pointing towards you, not be pointing away from you, basically perfectly perpendicular with the floor. And depending on how long your arms are, you might have to go a little bit wider than that, or you might have to go a little bit narrower than that. But that's the key sign that you have the proper width grip for normal pressing. Now, if you're going to do some close grip pressing, you want to have your hands a few inches apart, but not so close that it starts to hurt your wrists. That is too close. And I would not recommend wide grip bench pressing because it can hurt your shoulders. I don't think it's worth the risk or the shoulder wear and tear. Can't see his name asks, I feel better on low carb mentally. Can I still grow? Yes, you can. Research shows that even keto can work fine for gaining muscle and strength. High carb just tends to work better for most, but that is not a reason to do high carb if you just prefer otherwise. Anonymous asks, what is your next move professionally? Well, right now it is publish more books. So I do have 4th editions of Bigger, Leaner, Stronger and Thinner, Leaner, Stronger, almost done, on the way. And they will be here this year, for sure. Bigger, Leaner, Stronger first, because I'm further along, not really with my work, just in the logistics of turning my work into finished products. And so the ebook and the audiobook of the 4th edition of Bigger, Leaner, Stronger, those are pretty close, probably a month or 2 away max. And then The same for Thin, Leaner, Stronger should follow within a couple of months of that. And then hard copies later this year because unfortunately lead times are very long on hard copy books. And I'm also working on my next book, which I'm not ready to talk about yet because unfortunately I think I'm going to need probably most of the rest of the year to finish the manuscript. I've been putting a fair amount of time into it, but the nature of these projects are the more I get into them, the more the scope grows. And I guess that's partially my fault, but hey, at least I'm trying to make the best possible book I can. So that's big for me, continue publishing books and continue selling books. And number 2 on my list is to continue growing Legion. There is a very clear path strategically to at least 50 million in annual revenue within the next, I would say, 1 to 2 years. And that's without considering international distribution and retail, which will start this year, but not in earnest. I don't think I'm going to go after retail in particular seriously for another 1 to 2 years because from what I understand talking with people who have built very big retail businesses is it's almost like starting a new business. It's obviously not as difficult as starting a new business and getting it to go, but just because you have a very successful e-commerce business does not necessarily mean you are going to be very successful in retail. It is its own beast. And the economics are worse, the logistics are worse. And so, again, my opinion based on the conversations I've had with people who know more about this stuff than I do is wait on retail, focus on e-commerce, keep gobbling up the low-hanging fruit that's there, and then go after retail when the business is even bigger, even better established, even more profitable, and possibly with a strategic partner to provide capital because it's very expensive to do retail properly. It's a gamble. And then number 3 is I would really like to write fiction. I've mentioned this a few times, and it is something I will do. I have to hold myself back. It actually takes discipline for me not to start doing it now because I really want to do it. I've done some of it in the past, and I really do enjoy it, and I really enjoy the art and the science of storytelling and making it all come together. And anyway, so when I do get to that, I am going to start with short stories, probably an alternate history with possibly some elements of sci-fi or fantasy worked in, but I have some ideas that I think are interesting that would be alternate history. And I think it makes the most sense to start with short stories before trying to tackle a novel. All right. Daniel Mufti 1 asks, can beet juice, beet powder, be a good pre-workout? Yes, it actually can. That's because it can help with power and it can help with strength. And that's why my pre-workout, why Legion's pre-workout Pulse has betein, which you can get from beet juice and beet juice powder, but it can be hard to get enough to get a clinically effective dose unless you're going to take a lot of that stuff. You can also just get betein as an ingredient, or you can get it in a pre-workout like Pulse, which you can learn about over at buylegion.com, buylegion.com/pulse if you want to check it out. And then Daniel had another question. Mike, cardio sucks, but I know it's important. How do you get motivated to do a session? Honestly, I don't. I just do it regardless of how I feel. And that applies to a lot of stuff that I do on a day-to-day basis. Like a lot of stuff that you have to do to run a business. I mean, technically I have 2 businesses because I have a publishing business, but a lot of stuff that goes into running and growing a business is really not that interesting to me anymore. A lot of it, I just do it regardless of how I feel. And in the case of cardio, I try to stack that with something else that I'm going to do, like Q&As on Instagram. I'm often answering questions in these Q&As, not for the podcast, but on Instagram. When I'm on the bike, and I will take work phone calls. I will intentionally schedule work phone calls for when I'm on the bike, or I'll make a personal phone call to make sure I stay in touch with friends and family and don't just be a complete hermit, which is my tendency. And if you want to find more of my musings on motivation, go over to legionathletics.com and search for motivation. You'll find a couple of articles that I've written on the topic. All right, next question. J. Ludlow86 asks, thoughts on teledildonics? Yes. Now, this is a question. Now, what is teledildonics? Well, think about it. We have tele and we have dildo. Yes, it's what you're thinking. Search it up for a minute. And if I were an engineer on such a project, I would worry that I was giving the universe yet another reason. There are many, but giving the universe yet another reason to just send in the asteroids, send in the solar flares. Just please, just save us from ourselves. All right, last we have a question from C. Tiff Play, and I think it's a she, asks, at what age should kids start lifting? Or what should they start with if they are showing interest in lifting? Great question. Bodyweight training is a great place to start, and kids can start with that as soon as they'd like. And then you can move to bands, you can move to kiddie weights. Those can just be added whenever, with proper instruction, of course. And then proper free weights are best introduced in their teens. You can find videos on social media of younger kids even doing Olympic lifting and doing a good job. And with great coaching and great programming, that clearly work, but that would not be my general recommendation. My general recommendation would be to start with basic strength training and to start probably somewhere around 13, 14, 15, 16, somewhere in that range, depending on how developed the kid is physically and where they're at mentally. We don't want underdeveloped kids in a physical sense getting in the gym and then trying to outlift their buddies or trying to do some of the things they see other people doing or getting into ego lifting. We really don't want kids to get hurt with weightlifting at a young age, and that doesn't have to happen. But again, you need to make sure the kid is well developed physically and is ready for it mentally, understands that it's not dangerous. We don't want them to be afraid of it, but we want them to respect it. And we want to make sure they have proper coaching, that they're being taught how to train properly. Well, I hope you liked this episode. I hope you found it helpful. And if you did, subscribe to the show because it makes sure that you don't miss new episodes. And it also helps me because it increases the rankings of the show a little bit, which of course then makes it a little bit more easily found by other people who may like it just as much as you. And if you didn't like something about this episode or about the show in general, or if you have ideas or suggestions or just feedback to share, shoot me an email, mike@muscleforlife.com, muscleforlife.com, and let me know what I could do better or just what your thoughts are about maybe what you'd like to see me do in the future. I read everything myself. I'm always looking for new ideas and constructive feedback. So thanks again for listening to this episode, and I hope to hear from you soon.